Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump is continuing to defend his administration's practice of forcibly separating immigrant children from their parents at the border in violation of international human rights law.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee-holding facility. It won't be. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places. We can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
But we need her seated. During his speech on Monday, Trump also falsely claimed Democrats were to blame for the practice. More than 2,000 children have been forcibly separated from their parents since mid-April alone. Trump also went on a xenophobic Twitter rant Monday about migration into Europe, tweeting, "Crime in Germany is way up. Big mistake made all over Europe in allowing millions of people in who we have so strongly and violently changed their culture," unquote. In fact, Germany recently recorded its lowest crime rate since 1992. Trump also tweeted, "We don't want what is happening with immigration in Europe to happen with us." Trump is meeting with Republicans today as the House is slated to hold votes on two separate immigration bills later this week. Outrage is continuing to mount over the Trump administration's practice of forcibly taking children away from their parents, which the American Association of Pediatrics calls government-sanctioned child abuse. The Pulitzer Prize-winning news outlet ProPublica released audio from inside a U.S. Customs and Border Protection facility in which children estimated to be between the ages of 4 and 10 years old are heard crying "Mama" and "Papi" after being separated from their parents. A warning: the video and audio is disturbing.
Well, we have an orchestra here, right? What we're missing is a conductor.
Of the audio, a Border Patrol agent is heard joking in Spanish, "Well, we have an orchestra here. What's missing is a conductor." Only minutes after the audio was released, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen began a White House press briefing during which she repeatedly lied by claiming only congressional action could stop the practice of separating children and parents. During the briefing, a reporter from New York Magazine played the audio of the children weeping out loud, leading one reporter to ask Kirstjen Nielsen, "How is this not child abuse?" Meanwhile, the technology company Microsoft is facing threats of a boycott over its collaboration with ICE, that's the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Over the weekend, a blog post from January resurfaced in which Microsoft said it's proud to support ICE and that Microsoft's technology can help the agency, quote, "accelerate facial recognition and identification," unquote. In response to the online outrage and boycott threats, the company said, quote, "Microsoft is dismayed by the forcible separation of children from their families at the border," unquote. We'll have more on the mounting outrage over the practice of forcibly separating thousands of immigrant children from their parents at the border after headlines. We'll be speaking with Pramila Jayapal, the congressmember from Washington State, as well as Sheila Jackson Lee. Both have visited detention centers in their states. The U.S. and South Korea have canceled joint military exercises on the Korean Peninsula scheduled for August, a week after President Trump vowed to end the United States' provocative war games during his historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un has traveled to China to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in his third trip to China so far this year. Meanwhile, President Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on an additional $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, escalating the threat of trade war between the U.S. and China. In more news on the Pentagon, President Trump announced Monday he'll direct the military to create a sixth branch of the armed forces aimed at dominating outer space.
When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. So important. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a Space Force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal.
That was President Trump speaking at a meeting of the National Space Council Monday. The Air Force currently oversees all outer space-related military activity. In his announcement, Trump said the Air Force and the Space Force would be separate but equal, parroting a phrase used to describe unconstitutional racial segregation. Defense Secretary James Mattis says he's opposed to creating a new Space Force. In Afghanistan, dozens of activists have arrived in the capital, Kabul, after a 435-mile march to demand peace. The march began with a dozen youth activists May 12th and swelled to over 70 men by the end of the 38-day journey, during which they crisscrossed government and Taliban-controlled territory. Their arrival in Kabul comes after the end of a historic three-day ceasefire between the Afghan military and the Taliban. This is Zamarai Zaland, one of the peace marchers.
We're calling on both the government and the Taliban to find a way for peace and to extend the ceasefire. We're feeling a pain in our hearts, and that's the pain of our people who are suffering from the conflicts. We want a ceasefire, and we want both sides to reach lasting peace in the country.
Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach needs more legal education. That's according to a federal judge who struck down Kansas's discriminatory voter ID laws and ordered their architect, Secretary of State Chris Kobach, to take 6 hours of legal classes. U.S. District Judge Julie Robinson ruled Kansas's law requiring voters show proof of citizenship prevented tens of thousands of eligible citizens from registering to vote. Kobach led the Trump administration's so-called Voter Fraud Commission and is a key architect of the GOP's voter suppression efforts nationwide. Former CIA software engineer Joshua Adam Schulte has been indicted on charges of violating the Espionage Act for allegedly leaking thousands of documents last year, revealing CIA programs and tools that are capable of hacking into both Apple and Android cell phones. WikiLeaks published the documents last March under the name Vault 7, calling it the largest leak of secret CIA documents in history. Schulte is already in federal custody on child pornography charges. And MoveOn, the United States' largest online progressive organization, has broken with House Democratic leadership and endorsed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's challenging New York Congressmember Joe Crowley. Crowley regularly floated as a potential Speaker of the House, but he's facing his first primary challenge in 14 years. Ocasio-Cortez is a 28-year-old community organizer. In a debate with Crowley on New York One, moderated by Errol Lewis, she called for the abolition of ICE. That's the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. This clip begins with Crowley.
Where this government is separating children from their mothers. It is antithetical to everything that I believe in, and that's what I fight for every day.
And you know what? If this organization is as fascist as you have called it,
I've said it's fascist.
And you have said it's fascist, then why don't you adopt the stance to eliminate it? This is a moral problem, and your response has been to apply more paperwork to this situation, to have ICE collect more information on immigrants, and that puts our communities in danger, and it also conveys a profound misunderstanding of how we should be approaching this problem.
That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's challenging New York Congressmember Joe Crowley in next Tuesday's primary. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.